And we are live for Tuesday night. Week 8 is in the books. How we doing, everyone? It was a fun week 8. It was a good National Tight Ends Day, one of the best tight end weeks I have ever seen. The fantasy football trade deadline is coming up. Like we did last week, we're going to really focus in on trade decisions during this live stream. I'm not going to talk through every single game from week 8. I will talk about some of the bigger storylines from some of the different games. Of course, we'll talk about some of the breaking news that happened today. Steph Diggs out for the season. Christian Kirk, he's out for the season. Anthony Richardson is getting benched. Doesn't sound like that is necessarily going to be the case the whole season, but that has massive fantasy implications for as long as he's on the bench. Diontae Johnson got traded to the Baltimore Ravens. We'll talk about that. Tons to get through and all the fallout from week 8. So let's start with the Steph Diggs injury. One of the bigger storylines for sure out of week 8. We got officially reported today. Steph Diggs out for the season. Nico Collins still on IR. We have Nico Collins projected to come back, I think, in one more week. Yeah, he's projected back in week 10. So we don't think Nico's going to be back week 9, but we do have him coming back in week 10. Nico Collins is a fantasy football league winner at this point, guys. You need to be trying to get Nico Collins if you can. He projects as a top 2 wide receiver in every single week of the fantasy football playoffs. Doesn't really matter who he's playing. He is matchup proof. You get the Chiefs in week 16, tough matchup, still projects as wide receiver 2 with no Steph Diggs. I mean, he's going to be going over 30% target shares in those games. So Nico Collins is definitely a clear buy. Tank Dell definitely improves without Steph Diggs. Hasn't really felt like Tank Dell has been himself really this season. No games over 20 points yet. I mean, we've seen 3 weeks now without Nico Collins. He's been over 13 points in 2 of those. He had a donut in week 7. The target shares have been consistent up till this week. Only an 11% target share this week with no Nico Collins. Only 4 targets. And Steph Diggs got hurt in this game as well. The game wasn't very close. Actually was close. Texans only won by 3 points in this game. So I still think this obviously benefits Tank Dell, but we'll see if Tank Dell really ends up being a fantasy football league winner. I think it's much more likely to be Nico than Tank. And this obviously is not good for CJ Stroud. Joe Mixon, meanwhile, has yet to have a bad game. And Steph Diggs being out should only skew this offense a little bit more run heavy. Really rough week 16 matchup specifically for Joe Mixon. No running backs have done well versus the Chiefs this season. But the Steph Diggs fallout really, I think, mainly benefits Nico Collins. He's just even more clearly going to be a league winner, assuming he's back to full health in the next couple of weeks, which I think he will be. On the other side of that game, so the Colts lose by 3. Anthony Richardson plays horrible. I mean, really, really a bad game, again, for A-Rich. Let me see if I can find him here. He, I think, completed 2 passes in the first half of this game, ends the game with a 31% completion percentage, 5.5 yards per attempt. Brutal stuff, guys. Anthony Richardson's at 44% completion percentage this season. Unreal stuff. Joe Flacco starting, though, is massive for the receivers, specifically Josh Downs. Josh Downs projects as a top 10 wide receiver this week against the Vikings, who ranked dead last for receivers this season in terms of fantasy points allowed. Guys, the Vikings have allowed the second most receptions and the second most yards and the second most touchdowns to receivers per game this season. Josh Downs has a 14-point floor in this game versus the Vikings and a 25-plus point ceiling with Joe Flacco starting. And Pittman's a way better option, too. I mean, literally, these guys went from outside the top 25 receivers to Downs being top 10 and Pittman being top 20 with Joe Flacco projected in as the starter in a good matchup. Definitely feeling much better about Josh Downs. I do think there's a good chance we see A-Rich come back at some point this season. They do have still a pretty difficult fantasy football playoff schedule. Got a matchup versus the Jets in week 11 too. But they get the Vikings this week. They get the Lions in week 12. Some good potential matchups. Really, Downs is a must start. Basically every single week that Joe Flacco is going to start. Josh Downs is going to explode. Yeah, I mean, he really is. All right, we're going to get to some specific trade questions here in a second. So the Ravens traded for Diontae Johnson. We'll talk about the fallout here. So first of all, for the Baltimore Ravens, this is clearly good for Lamar Jackson, who's not going to be easy to acquire in fantasy. I generally don't think it's smart to go try to trade for quarterbacks either. But Lamar definitely benefits from Diontae. And they gave up almost nothing to get him. I think they traded up one round in the NFL draft, like from a 6th to a 5th round pick. I think it was the trade to get Diontae for 1 year. Rashad Bateman is the biggest loser from the trade. He is droppable at this point. Zay Flowers definitely does not benefit from this trade either. For the same reason Garrett Wilson didn't benefit from the Davante Adams trade. It's a little bit of a lesser extent here. I still think Zay Flowers is going to be a wide receiver 2 for fantasy. We still got him projected wide receiver 15 this week against a tough Broncos defense. He's been really consistent for the most part this season, over 18 points in 3 of his last 4 games, over 100 yards in all 3 of those. He had a bad game week 7 versus the Bucs in a good matchup. That was a Rashad Bateman game. But yeah, Diontae just makes this offense much less consolidated target share amongst this offense, a lot more risk with each of the pass catchers. This is bad for Zay Flowers. It's bad for Mark Andrews. It's bad for Likely. It's bad for Bateman. It's good for Lamar. And I'm really not sure if it's good for Diontae Johnson either. Much more competition for targets here for Diontae. The Ravens also, when they get big leads, they can skew run heavy. The secondary has been really bad, so they haven't had that many huge leads this season. And then for the Panthers, I mean, this definitely is big for Xavier Legette. And Adam Thielen should be back soon too. I mean, these are the 2 guys that are likely to lead this team in targets the rest of the season. They're going to continue to also lean very heavily on the running backs. Math. What's going on, Alex? So yes, Zay Flowers' value definitely drops now. Definitely. I'm not sure if I would trade to go get Josh Downs, just given his fantasy football playoff schedule. Downs is more of a if you really need some help to get into the fantasy playoffs, then I could see an argument to go trade for Josh Downs. He does still have the week 14 bye, but he gets the Broncos in week 15 and the Titans in week 16. And Anthony Richardson might be starting in those games still. So I'm not sure he's going to be this league-winning player in the fantasy playoffs. But, I mean, this week you want him. This week he's a top 10 option. In week 12, if Flacco's starting, he's a top 10 option versus the Lions. Sam, I'm down bad. I lost Diggs, Ayuk, Hollywood, and Rice. Yeah, I mean, you look back at the average draft position. Let me pull this up quick. You look back at the average draft position from this season, and you look at the receivers. And it's a bloodbath, man. Absolute bloodbath. Let me pull this up. We'll go to the draft board here from 2024. See if I can find this. Basically, half. It's like a third or half of the receivers taken in like the first 6 rounds are injured. Let's pull this up. We'll go to PPR here. We'll talk through it. All right. So CeeDee Lamb, he's healthy. Tyreek and Waddle, they were without Tua for a month. Amon-Ra's healthy. Chase is healthy. Jefferson's healthy. AJ Brown got hurt. He's back now though. Garrett Wilson had a Davante Adams trade. He's not a top 12 receiver anymore. Puka Nacua missed over a month. He's back now, though. Puka Nacua's back. He's a top 12 receiver again. Davante Adams is healthy. He missed at least 3 games as well. Marvin Harrison Jr. has been healthy. He missed a game with a concussion. Drake London is healthy. Olave missed some time with a concussion. He's fine. Nico's been on IR. He missed a month. Mike Evans is hurt. Debo's healthy, but he did have an illness, missed a game. Ayuk's out for the season. Kupp's missed a month. Michael Pittman Jr. is dealing with a back injury, has not been quite the same, but he hasn't missed a game. Metcalf's hurt. He missed a game. He should be back hopefully this week. Waddle's been without Tua. Steph Diggs out for the season. Malik Neighbors missed some time. T. Higgins has missed some time. Rice out for the season. Christian Kirk out for the season. Chris Godwin out for the season. I mean, it's been a bloodbath. I mean, really, a ton of injuries for the receivers this year. How are we doing? We're doing fantastic. We're doing great. And we are locked in to the fantasy playoffs right now. It's time to lock into the playoffs. All right, let's look at this comment quick. Got an offer for my Debo and Bigsby for Olave and Rashad White. Debo versus Olave is a close call. Let me go to the rest of the season rankings here in the YouTube Live. We're live on TikTok and YouTube right now, by the way, guys, on the YouTube Live. I can share a screen. It's a better viewing experience. Sell Reed. We'll talk about Jaden Reed. I don't think selling Reed's the worst call. We'll go to subscriber-only comment mode too later on in the live to make sure I get to those. But yeah, Debo versus Olave is definitely close. We got Olave a few spots ahead of Debo rest of season. I do really like Debo without Ayuk. I mean, we saw it a bit here in week 8. He only had 12.6 points. He had a long touchdown called back from a holding penalty. He gets a good week 17 matchup, a fine week 15 matchup, I think. And then the Dolphins week 16 is not great. It's not the best fantasy playoff schedule, but he still has a really high ceiling. Olave, though, I've been talking about it really since the Rashid Shaheed injury. He was one of the most obvious buys in fantasy. He had a stretch where he only scored 2.5 fantasy points for 3 weeks, weeks 5 through 7. He missed one of those games. Comes back in week 8, and there's the target share. We expect a 37% target share, guys, for Chris Olave. There is no one else other than Olave and Kamara to throw the ball to in this offense. I mean, he's going to go over 30% target share probably rest of the season. He gets the Commanders in week 15, and then the Packers and the Raiders in the playoffs. But he is a guy that can be matchup proof with that target share. And Derek Carr is likely back this week, too. That's going to help him. So, yeah, Chris Olave, I think, over Debo. I think I like that trade. If you're giving up Debo, you're getting Chris Olave. Yeah, Achane. So let's go to the Dolphins game. Definitely Tua being back. Immediate impact, really, for the whole offense. Waddle continued to struggle. We have not seen Waddle score more than 10 points since week 1 of the season. And guys, in week 1, Jalen Waddle, he only had a 14% target share. Jalen Waddle doesn't even have a 17% target share this season. His target share ranks 59th in the NFL. He had only a 16% target share into his first game back. I mean, he's a brutal guy to have in fantasy right now. He's not a guy you feel comfortable starting, and you definitely can't drop him. So really tough guy for fantasy. Again, he has not been over 10 points yet since week 1. He hasn't had a big target share game really with Tua this season. He's only played 2 games with Tua. Both games under 16% target share. But yeah, this is massive that Tua is back for Achane. Achane really looks like a top 5 running back rest of the season with Tua back. Achane had 6 catches for 50 yards and a touchdown. He had a 21% target share. He's got a solid schedule coming up over the next month. Kind of a difficult fantasy football playoff schedule, but the efficiency was back for Achane. This is what we saw last season. This was the most efficient game of Achane's season. 9.7 yards per carry. That reminds me a bit of last season. 8.3 yards per reception. So yeah, Achane definitely, the arrow's pointing up. Mostert did vulture touchdowns in this game. It didn't really matter, though. Achane still finished in PPR leagues with 26.7 points, was the running back 2 this week, despite Mostert taking the touchdowns, despite Mostert scoring 2 rushing touchdowns. Achane was still the running back 2 because of the receiving rule. So yeah, you got to feel very good about Achane. Arrow definitely pointing up. Do I like Ramondre? No, I don't. The schedule's not bad, but the offense is, and the offensive line is. Ramondre had 23.5 this week, scored twice, played 80% of the snaps, while season high snap share. Did not realize he had a season high snap share this week till just now. We're on, if you're watching live on TikTok, again, on the YouTube live, links are in the TikTok bio. I got my screen share up. We're looking at the Ramondre game logs. He had a season high snap share, season high rush share, still had 3 targets as well. But he was at 2.4 yards per carry, which was the season low. I mean, he was incredibly inefficient. He has not been efficient for weeks. We've not seen an efficient Ramondre Stevenson game. He was kind of efficient in week 5. Very efficient in week 5, actually. 12 carries, 7.4 yards per carry in week 5. But yeah, this was a rough efficiency game. Hard to expect a ton of efficiency. Hard to expect a ton of touchdowns from Andre. Why is Terry so low rest of season rankings? Yeah, let's take a look at that. Could see an argument for him being higher. Let's take a look at his playoff schedule too. Let's go back to the this is the rest of season rankings to see. Terry McLaurin, he's at wide receiver 31, dropped a bit this week despite another good game. He's at 17th in points per game. Doesn't have a terrible fantasy playoff schedule. Yeah, I would argue he probably should be a bit higher. He probably should be a bit higher than this. Let's see what the efficiencies have been like. 14 point. Yeah, we probably need to get his yards per reception up. 3 yards per route run. 3.0 yards per route run too. 13th in the league is very strong. Let me take a look at this real quick. I can pull up the assumptions we have for McLaurin. I imagine. I think I agree he should probably be a bit higher. Let's see. Pull this up. What do I do with Kyle Pitts and K-Dot? And do I trade one or keep both? Yeah, I think I would probably lean. I think these guys are neck and neck in the rest of season rankings. Yeah. Let's look at the fantasy playoff schedules here. I don't mind keeping both. It's a tough schedule for Pitts in the fantasy playoffs. Otten gets a better schedule. I'd be okay if you could trade one of these guys. They're definitely pretty comparable. I don't hate holding on to both. Let's take a look here. We got Terry McLaurin. Yeah, we can probably bump this up a little bit for McLaurin. See where that puts him rest of the season. We're projecting rest of season for Terry McLaurin just under 70% catch rate and just under 14.5 yards per reception. So a little bit of regression with his efficiency. Target share wise, we got him at 20% target share every week, which is above what he's been at this season. That honestly might be a little bit even too high. 25% is maybe a bit more realistic. And the touchdown rate's at 7.3%. He's been at 10% this season. That might be just a little bit low too. I think he'll move up in the ranks though after the adjustments I just made. I dropped in joking that you should not do that. Why Spears? Yeah, so a lot of these guys, the league-winning bench stashes, I would include Spears on that league-winning bench stashes list. The league-winning bench stashes. Stash these guys if you have space on your bench. Braylon Allen, Trey Benson. Trey Benson's a very sneaky one. He's definitely available still in a lot of leagues. Blake Corum, same thing. Talk about both these guys. Tajay Spears, we'll talk about here in a second. And then Tyler Algier, too. Not all these guys will be available in your leagues. But as the season goes on, these are the types of guys that I think you should be stashing on your bench. When you look at your bench in fantasy and you're staring at guys like Tyler Lockett, for example, who is good enough, arguably, to be on your bench and potentially fill in a role. Ask yourself, is this guy ever going to start on my team for the rest of the season? Because if he's unlikely to start on your team for the rest of the season, I'd much rather stash Braylon Allen, Trey Benson, Blake Corum, Tajay Spears, Tyler Algier, all who have fantastic fantasy football playoff schedules. I think outside of Corum, I don't think the Rams have the best schedule in the fantasy playoffs. So they do have a decent one. Get the Cardinals, 49ers, and Jets. Not terrible. But all of these guys are an injury away from winning fantasy leagues. Braylon Allen, he's going to win leagues if Breece Hall goes down. Guys, look at the Jets' schedule in the fantasy playoffs. They get the Jags, the Rams, and then the Bills. Those are all bottom 12 defenses versus running backs. Look at the Cardinals' schedule, guys, in the fantasy playoffs. If James Conner misses time, by the way, James Conner's missed at least one game in every single year of his career. He's missed every single season. He's missed at least one game. Has not missed a game yet this season. They get the Pats and the Panthers. The Cardinals get the Pats and the Panthers to open up the fantasy playoffs. Those are the two worst defenses versus running backs this season. And then they get the Rams in the finals. Trey Benson can win leagues if James Conner misses time. Blake Corum can win leagues if Kyron Williams, who's the best role in the NFL, misses time. Tajay Spears, look at the schedule for the Titans. They get a great fantasy playoff schedule too. They get the Bengals, Colts, and Jags. Bengals have been okay versus running backs, pretty good. Colts and Jags have been terrible. If Tony Pollard misses time, Tajay Spears can win leagues. If Tajay Spears misses time, Tony Pollard can win leagues with this schedule. I think Spears is probably back this week. And then same thing goes for Tyler Algier. Bijan misses time. They've got a great fantasy football playoff schedule. And it's going to be tough to go trade for Breece Hall, to go trade for Bijan Robinson. It's going to be hard to go trade for James Conner right now. But you can at least stash the backups, and if an injury happens, you can win your league rather than stashing a guy, again, like Tyler Lockett, just as an example, who's never going to start in your lineup and is never going to win your league. He's never going to win you your league. And these guys at least have a path to winning you your league. Kupp and Madison for Reed, Cooper, and Najee. Yeah, I think it's a pretty good trade, Jack, especially if you're going to start all three of those guys. Let's talk about Jaden Reed. I know someone else brought up Jaden Reed. He's been pretty disappointing for back-to-back weeks now. Jordan Love got hurt in this game. Sounds like he's going to be okay. We'll see if he plays this week. Jaden Reed is really, he's looking more and more like a boom-bust weekly option, where the ceiling I still think is really, really high for Jaden Reed every single week, but the floor is looking pretty low. I mean, he's been below 11 points now in 4 of his last 7 games. And in one of those games, he was wide receiver 2 against the Vikings. He had 27.1 points, 7 catches, 139 yards. I think there was a Christian Watson injury maybe that week in week 4. But the problem for the Packers receivers in fantasy is there's just so many of them. You got Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Dontavian Wicks, Tucker Kraft. You got the running backs mixing in. I mean, they mixed in three different running backs this past week. So that's a tough thing for fantasy in terms of consistency. But Jaden Reed's still a top 25 wide receiver rest of the season. He still has a really, really high ceiling every week, especially in some of these good matchups. Hey, Sam, what up, man? Hope all is well. Thanks, Cam. Hope all is well with everybody in this live stream right now. If you guys are tuned in to this live, by the way, I know my Sunday morning lives is the slightly more popular one, but I actually think, Sunday, we're grinding through the start sits, and it's an exciting day, of course, and you got to get the start sits right. But ultimately, it's really like the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday decisions often that will actually win you your leagues. Like making the right trades, making the right adds and drops. Like these are the league altering decisions, in the long term, especially for the smart people out there starting to plan for the fantasy playoffs, which I definitely think you should be doing. Look ahead to the playoffs. What up, man? Would you try and trade away Goff for a Diontae Burrow? Yes. Cam, just generally, if you can trade a quarterback and upgrade one of your starting lineup positions or get a league winning guy to stash in your bench, especially if that quarterback's not starting for you, do that. There's very few weeks you're going to want to start Goff over Burrow. Like this week, we got Burrow over Goff. I think pretty easily. Burrow's been great. He ranks as QB7. I think Goff is all the way down. He's all the way down to QB17. Playing the Packers, they rank 12th best versus quarterbacks. Burrow gets the Raiders. They've not been good. Burrow does have a kind of a tough fantasy football playoff schedule, which is a little rough. I mean, that matchup versus the Titans really isn't great. Could be a run-heavy game, potentially. The matchup versus the Browns is not great, and then they get the Broncos in Week 17. So you might want to think ahead to weeks 16 and 17. Let's take a look at Goff here and see if he matches that well. He doesn't really. So, yeah, I'm fine trading Goff. I would look ahead, though. I think Dak Prescott's still a pretty clear buy. This might be the last sort of window to get him, too, because he's got a good matchup this week versus the Falcons. He still has a really good fantasy playoff schedule. Kyler Murray is going to be tough to get after a good matchup, after a good week versus the Dolphins. He's got a pretty good playoff schedule. Jalen Hurts is the best QB schedule the rest of the season. I think he's the only quarterback that I'd likely try trading for. Would you do Kupp and Ramondre for Swift, Devontae, and Jawan Jennings? Let's take a look at the Swift schedule. He's been really good for, I think, 4 straight games now. Swift is 4 for 4 in his last 4. Trade Tyron Tracy for Pickens. Yep, I would do that. DK for Debo. I think I would do that one too. Yeah, that one's pretty close. DeAndre Swift has at least 18 points in 4 straight games. He's been a top 12 running back in 4 straight games. And he gets 2 more good matchups coming up. 2 tough matchups in the playoffs versus the Vikings and the Lions, but he can catch passes too. In games where the Bears fall behind, he's been playing over 65% of the snaps in 3 straight games. He's getting about half the carries. He didn't get any targets this week, but he's had pretty consistent target share for most of the season. I would take him over Mondre for sure. And then Devontae versus Kupp is a tough call. I think we'll see better games ahead for Devontae Adams, who's really not coming off the field at this point. Great Week 15 matchup for the Jets. Not terrible, really, spots, I feel like, for the Jets there in Week 16, 17. Man, what a rough loss, by the way, for the Jets. I mean, they are down really bad right now. Their defense has not been great since the firing of their coach. Let's put this one in the trade analyzer and check this out. By the way, if you guys don't have the Walter Picks app yet, you got to download the Walter Picks app. It is the best trade analyzer you could possibly find for the fantasy trade decisions. It's going to help you with start sits. It's going to help you next draft season for your draft. It's going to help you with player props for NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL likely coming soon. All right, we got Kupp and Ramondre. And one of the powerful things about the trade analyzer in the Walter Picks app, if you sync your league, you'll also see not just the trade value, which is just one piece of a trade decision. It's also, how did this trade impact my starting lineup rest of season? That's what actually matters, especially in the playoffs too, which you can look at. Jawan Jennings was out this past week, but he should be back soon, I believe. Let's see what this trade looks like. Yeah, it's a fair trade. I don't know how to feel about Cooper Kupp right now. There's a bunch of trade rumors circulating. Doesn't seem super likely he gets traded. He only played 58% of snaps this past week, still at a 24% target share. He's now over a 20% target share every game he's played. He didn't even play a full game in week 2. Not the worst schedule for him, but Puka's back too, and I do think that lowers his floor and ceiling a bit. Him and Adams feel pretty comparable. We actually have Adams a slightly higher trade value. I think you got to do this. I think you're upgrading at running back. lateral move at receiver, plus you add Juwan Jennings for some depth. I think this is fine. Allen or Spears? I think I'd lean towards Braylon Allen over Spears. Kelsey and Dobbins for CMC. I like it. I mean, I have been arguing really since before the season against Travis Kelsey in fantasy football. This was the worst possible week for me, given I have no Travis Kelsey. And I've been arguing people to trade away Travis Kelsey. This feels like a good time to try to do it if you still have Travis Kelsey. And I was very, very open about my reasoning for this from the very beginning. And it has not changed. It really has not changed. I think Kelsey projects as a top 3 tight end rest of season. And from week 1, I thought he projected arguably the number 1 tight end. And I think that became even more true after the Rice injury. But you look ahead at the fantasy football playoffs, and it's hard to get super excited about Travis Kelsey because last season we saw a similar thing play out that I'm worried about. Travis Kelsey smashed last season, guys. He wasn't, it wasn't his best season in terms of fantasy points per game, but he was tight end 1 in terms of fantasy points per game. Really didn't have very many bad games until the fantasy playoffs game. And then he went under 10 points in week 15, 16, and 17 because the Chiefs were not pushing him to the max. How do you update Walter picks when I make a trade? Hasn't updated since week 2. You make sure you have the latest version of the app. Close and open the app, Jack, and then go to the App Store. Search for Walter picks in the App Store and hit update. I think you just need to close and open the app most likely though. But also, if you want the latest version of the App Store, we've done a bunch of stuff to improve the app and fix any things that were broken. So, yeah, I think this is a great time to trade away Travis Kelsey. He's got a tough fantasy football playoff schedule, but it's really not even about the schedule. The schedule doesn't matter that much for Kelsey. It's really about what are the Chiefs even going to be playing for in weeks 15, 16, and 17, that they're going to push their 35-year-old tight end to the max when it matters most in the fantasy football playoffs. Like, there's a good chance that Kelsey is not in his full role in week 16 or 17 when you really need him. That's what we saw last season. They are the only undefeated team in the NFL. You look ahead at their schedule. And if you are in our Discord, by the way, which is no reason not to be in our Discord, it's a free Discord. There's some premium subscription channels too. If you're a Walter Picks subscriber, you get access to some premium Discord channels in there. The link to the Discord is in the YouTube description. If you're watching live on TikTok, come to the YouTube. Link is in the TikTok bio. But we talked about this in the Discord a couple weeks ago with the Chiefs. I actually think it was last week. I mean, they were obviously going to beat the Raiders. There's almost no chance they lose to the Bucs. They're 8.5-point favorites at home versus the Bucs on Monday Night Football this week. Then they get the Broncos. Almost no chance they lose to the Broncos. It would be shock for them to lose to the Bucs or Broncos. They're going to be over a touchdown favorite versus both those teams. Well, let's call the Bills game a toss-up. Maybe they lose versus the Bills. There's no chance they lose to the Panthers. And then they get the Raiders again. No chance they lose to them. Are the Chargers really going to beat them? Maybe one of the Chargers or the Browns or the Texans can beat them, but two of those teams probably won't. And then all of a sudden they only have 1 or 2 losses. They've locked up the 1 seed, and we're in the fantasy football finals, and Kelsey's barely playing. So, yeah, I think you should trade away Kelsey. I think that makes sense. Rest of season, McLaurin or Olave? Yeah, it's Olave for me. I think I'd go Olave. Let's see. I want to see what that update did for McLaurin. Yeah, we got McLaurin up to wide receiver 27 now. I'm going to up this touchdown rate just slightly too. I'll probably put him in the top 24. Yeah, he's at number 25 now. I'll push this change in a second. Yeah, we're buying Nico Collins because Diggs is out for the season. Nico's going to be a league winner when he comes back. He's matchup proof. He's matchup proof. Would you cut a running back like Bigsby to pick up Keon Coleman free agency? Yeah, so I mean, we saw it this week. We talked about it last week. We talked about it again this week on the Sunday morning live every Sunday morning, by the way, if you missed it. Tank Bigsby's a touchdown-dependent running back. He actually had 2 catches this week, which is more than he had all season, but he didn't score. Only 10 points in PPR leagues. Finished outside the top 25 running backs. 78 rushing yards. Did not score a touchdown. And he's got a tough schedule coming up to score touchdowns too, and ETN's probably back this week. Is he droppable in certain spots? Sure. Let's take a quick look over at Keon Coleman, who's quietly breaking out. Him and Khalil Shakir had great weeks this week, despite Amari Cooper being there. Amari took kind of a step back this past week. Still think Amari has a good ceiling, and I'd probably prefer over Keon Coleman, I think. But 5 catches, 70 yards, and a touchdown after having a season high, career high, 125 yards the week before. Back-to-back weeks over 15 fantasy points. Had a season high or second best, 83% snap share, despite Amari being there. His target share was, again, 22%. He's seeing a ton of air yards. Yeah, I think Keon Coleman's got a slightly higher ceiling. And you look ahead at the playoff schedule for the Bills passing attack. They get the Lions in week 15. That game could be extremely high scoring. I mean, you're definitely going to want pieces of the Bills and Lions in that game. So, yeah, I think this is fine, especially if you're not starting Bigsby. Who is Brooks? That's Jonathan Brooks. Jonathan Brooks is going to be hard to trade for, I think, at this point, because he's going to come back soon. This is just a difficult time, sort of psychologically, for people to trade away Jonathan Brooks if you've waited this long to see what he looks like. And I think this week we probably see Jonathan Brooks. If it's not this week, it's next week. And if it's not week 10, then it's going to be week 12. Almost definitely that we see Jonathan Brooks. Jonathan Brooks, the first running back drafted in this draft class. Keon and McBride for Pickens and Bowers. Yeah, I would do that. I think you're getting both of the better players there. I take Pickens over Keon, and I would take Bowers over McBride. Basically, all the trade targets here, guys, on the TikTok live, they have amazing fantasy playoff schedules. We'll talk through all of them on the YouTube live, too. You're not missing out if you're watching live on YouTube. Hit the like button, by the way. If you're watching live on YouTube, helps me out way more than you realize. I did want to look ahead at the defenses on this live because I haven't spent enough time looking at that. And I want to make sure I'm stashing the right defenses, too, in my leagues. But Jonathan Brooks, just real quick, he was the first running back taken in this draft class. He probably would have been a first-round pick in the NFL draft had he not torn his ACL when he did. He's now fully healthy. He's been fully healthy for a while. He's probably going to be back this week, if not next week. If not, he'll for sure be back week 12. For the Carolina Panthers, who are not good, but they have given a lot of work to the running backs this season, and they do have a fantastic fantasy football playoff schedule. So he absolutely has league-winning upside. All right, let's take a look, guys, real quick. Let's do the grunt work here on the live and just take a quick peek at defenses here and some of the matchups that they have. Let's take a look. Let me just pull up the schedule. And let's take a look who's playing in the best matchups here. All right, so we got in week 17. Let's start week 15, actually. The Chiefs defense is definitely one you're going to want to hold on to. They get the Browns in week 15. Browns offensive line has struggled. We got the Chiefs projected as the best defense in week 15 right now. I can actually even just toggle to this real quick. In week 15, you're going to want the Chiefs. The Ravens get the Giants. So the Chiefs defense, the Ravens defense, the Bengals get the Titans. Chiefs, Ravens, Bengals. Probably the top three defenses in week 15. The Chiefs, the Ravens, and the Bengals. The Ravens are probably available because they've been really bad. They're definitely worth stashing. Versus the Giants in week 15. The Bengals get the Titans. That's almost a lock to be a good matchup. The Falcons, they get the Raiders. They're definitely worth stashing. Let's go. Week 15 defenses to stash. Chiefs, Ravens, Bengals, the Falcons, Broncos versus the Colts. I definitely think there's a chance Anthony Richardson starting at that point. They feel worth stashing. And then the Cowboys, they get the Panthers. So we'll put them too. I think these are the week 15 defenses to stash. Pull this up on screen here if you're watching live on YouTube. Again, all that matters is the fantasy playoffs, guys. You got to plan ahead. Njoku and Chase Brown. Yeah, I feel pretty good about Njoku right now. It was an insane tight end week, so he didn't end up finishing that high among the tight ends. He still was a top 10 tight end, though. Number 7, 17 points. Back-to-back games over 17 points. For Njoku, back-to-back games over 60 yards and a touchdown. He's got 15 catches, 150 yards, and 2 TDs his last 2 games. Guys, Njoku was the number 1 tight end in the back half of the season last year. He's got a fantastic schedule rest of season, and Jameis Winston definitely raises the ceiling for that whole offense. Should I do Kyron Williams? Best defenses to stream. Yeah, so week 15 is what we were just talking about for the best defenses to stream. Thoughts on Otten? Yeah, I mean, he's right up there in the top 8 tight ends the rest of the season. I think he's at number 8 right now, but he's tight end 3 this week. He has a great matchup versus the Chiefs. All right, so that was week 15 defenses to stash. Let's jump ahead here to week 16, see if there's any overlap. So, oh man, the Bengals get the Browns in week 16. So the Bengals show up here twice. There may be the defense to stash. Week 16 defenses to stash here. We got the Bengals, The Jaguars get the Raiders. The Colts get the Titans. The Falcons again show up too. They get the Giants. I think these are probably the 3 here for week 16. Let's pull up the. I think there's a trend here though that of the Bengals and the Falcons. Let's pull up the Bengals defense. I know this is not the most exciting necessarily topic, but guys, this is really like the type of thing. If you plan ahead this far in advance and you have spots on your bench as you know you're going to make the fantasy playoffs, this is massive. The Cincinnati Bengals get the Titans, the Browns, and then the Broncos in the fantasy football playoffs. Definitely a pretty good schedule. I know their defense hasn't been great, but I really care mostly about the matchups. And then the Falcons defense, they haven't been that great either. But they get the Raiders and then the Giants in the fantasy football playoffs. And then we just got to look at week 17. Neither of them have really the best week 17 matchups. Man, do the Jaguars really, are they really a defense to stash here? Let's take a look. They had a good week 16 matchup, I think. Their defense has been so bad. They had to get the Raiders and the Titans, and the Jets aren't the best matchup. They do have 2 good matchups, the Raiders. The Jaguars. The Colts, too. I think the Colts are a sneaky defense to stash. They've also been a bad defense, but they get the Giants in the fantasy playoffs. And they have a good week 16 matchup, too. They get the Broncos, Titans, and Giants, too. I think these are 3 defenses, honestly. 3 sneaky defenses to stash. The Bengals, the Colts, the Falcons. And I think if you have the Chiefs, Ravens, too, that's probably pretty good. This week, in terms of defenses to stream, if we take a quick look at this week, it's the Chargers, Commanders, the Bengals, the Vikings. I actually don't think I'd stream the Vikings versus the Colts with Flacco starting. The Pats defense definitely streamable, too, versus the Titans. Chiefs and Saints are good options as well. Honestly, the Saints might be the best option against the Panthers. Bryce Young might start again. We'll see about that. Either way, Saints are probably a pretty good option. All right, let's get back to some of the comments here before we wrap up the live. Start Mahomes or Knicks this week. This is not a start sit live. Your take on the Diontae trade. Yeah, so I think there's pretty clear winners and losers from the trade. The winner is Lamar Jackson. The losers are all of the pass catchers for the Ravens. It's a loss for Zay Flowers for fantasy. It's definitely an L for Mark Andrews, for Isaiah Likely, and the biggest L of all is Rashad Bateman. I think it's a lateral move for Diontae. I don't think we can expect the same level of consistency in terms of targets for Diontae Johnson. Tough first matchup here versus the Broncos. Hard to start him in this first game. Who knows what his role is going to be like. I think we actually don't even have him projected in right now. We'll see if he ends up playing. He did miss last week with a supposed injury. We'll see if that's even a real injury. But the target share obviously had been pretty good. He had a 27% target share so far this season. He's probably not hitting a 27% target share for the Ravens, in at least consistently. There could be some games where he does, but this is just now a less consolidated target share team. So all of these guys get a little bit riskier every week now. I still think Zay Flowers is a start in most leagues. Still a top 24 wide receiver option, most likely. But it's not good for him. He definitely drops in the rest of the season ranks because of this. So it really mainly benefits Lamar. And then on the Panther side, Xavier Legette and Adam Thielen. They're the biggest winners, the clear biggest winners. Bro, I got Debo, Neighbors, Bowers, Gibbs, and Bijan. Yeah, I do not know how you did that. I mean, I do. You probably started Gibbs and Bijan. It maybe made some good trades. Got Neighbors, Bowers, and Debo just too late in the draft. But yeah, that's an insane stack that you have on your team. Trade away Aaron Jones for Breece? Yes, definitely. Definitely. And Aaron Jones is not a guy I'm actively trying to sell. I still take him over. I still take Breece over him the rest of the season. Breece has one of the best fantasy football playoff schedules that you can find. And Aaron Jones really had the biggest role of his season this past week. 92% snap share for Aaron Jones, season high. Had a season high rush share. He was not coming off the field. We've never seen Aaron Jones in a role like this. Got a couple great matchups coming up. But yeah, I still would prefer Breece. Breece is also still an incredible role. Jacoby Myers definitely rising. Yep, he's worth an ad. Should I drop Diontae for Tillman? I don't think I'd do that. Trade Saquon and Kupp. Ooh, I don't like that so far. For Gibbs, Debo, and Pickens, I need depth. If you need depth, I like it. I mean, Saquon and Gibbs, is there that big of a difference there? Really? We got Saquon at running back 6, Gibbs at running back 8 right now. And then Kupp is definitely you're upgrading to Debo. And honestly, Pickens, I might prefer Pickens just straight up over Kupp. Yeah, right now we have Pickens ahead of Kupp rest of the season. Would you rather Jonathan Taylor or DK? Yeah, I mean, it depends on what positions you need, but I do feel pretty good about Jonathan Taylor after this past week. He had 20 carries, I think it was. Where do we have Jonathan Taylor here? We got him at running back 5. Feels maybe a little bit high. I don't know if I'd take him over CMC. He does have a pretty good schedule. But yeah, I think probably Jonathan Taylor. Terry or Garrett Wilson. That one's definitely close. They get the Jets get the Jags in week 15, which is really good for Garrett Wilson. I did just update McLaurin's rank. Let me make sure that gets updated in the app. We got McLaurin now. Once the app update goes through, wide receiver 23 rest of season. I'll push that right now. All right. Why trade for Breeze? Because look at his playoff schedule. Brees Hall gets the Jags, the Rams, and the Bills in the fantasy playoffs. All bottom 12 defenses versus the running backs. The Jags are the 3rd worst defense versus running backs. The Bills are the 5th worst. My wide receivers are JJ and AJ Brown. For running backs, I only have 3 with Achane, Mixon, and Monty. Do you think I trade away any of them? No. I'm first in my league. Yeah, no. I mean, you're sitting in a great spot. You got Achane and Mixon. Both top 12 running backs rest of the season. Both top 10 in our ranks. David Montgomery is pretty high up there too. He's at running back 15. And David Montgomery is some of the most contingent upside in all fantasy if Gibbs misses time. And then you got 2 top 5 receivers. I mean, we got AJ Brown at number 7. I think I would argue him probably over Neighbors. I think you could argue him over Drake London too. I mean, it's close. But he's in the top 10 too. He's still number 2 wide receiver in fantasy points per game. And then Jay Jett is the number 1. So yeah, I don't think you don't need to make moves. Sometimes the best move is no move. Sometimes that is the best move. Should I trade Tank Dell for Kareem Hunt? I'm 3-5 and I have Achane, CMC, Olave cut for my running backs and receivers, and Najee JSN to play flex instead of Dell. Yeah, I don't hate this, and it might be a little bit till CMC fully ramps up. CMC obviously on bye this week too. So yeah, I think this is fine. I think this is not the worst time to trade Tank. His value is pretty high right now after the injury. Is Marvin going to be good now? He's going to be what he's been, which is good. He's just going to be a bit inconsistent for fantasy. 6 catches, 111 yards this week. Had a 21% target share, in line with around his season average. Was finally seeing some air yards though. 136 air yards, most he's seen since week 3. They were giving him a slightly more diverse route tree too. He's got a good fantasy football playoff schedule. He is a boom bust wide receiver too. He's got a really high weekly ceiling and a really low weekly floor. That's just going to be what his role is. They aren't forcing targets to Marvin Harrison Jr. Is Neighbors from Monty and DJ Moore good? I think that's fair. You're giving up the best player in the trade. But if you're going to start Monty and DJ Moore, it's a fair deal. You should put that into the Walter Picks trade analyzer. Sync your league to the Walter Picks app. Link is in the TikTok bio. I spent the last 4 years of my life helping build this app, helping build this trade analyzer. It's going to show you not only the trade values, but also how many starting lineup points you're adding or losing rest of season. You can even filter the playoffs to see how it impacts your fantasy playoff outlook. And you can do all of this for free with the 7-day trial you get in the app if you use code SAM as well. That helps me out. Use code SAM if you're watching live on TikTok. Javonte versus Tracy. We got Javonte running back 21. Tracy looked great. We got him a slightly higher. So yeah, I think I would take Tracy over Javonte. He looked really good. He's probably going to miss this week with the injury. I think he'll probably miss this week with the head injury. I think it was a concussion. Really disappointing game for Javonte this past week. Kyron for Bijan in playoffs. I think it's Bijan. The Falcons have a great schedule in the playoffs. Raiders, Giants, Commanders And Kyron's been great. He ranks as the running back 1 in the app right now. He doesn't have a terrible schedule. 49ers, Jets, Cardinals. I think I lean towards Bijan just slightly based on the schedule, though, for the playoffs. Rank these 4. Rest of season: Kraft, Goddard, Laporta, Andrews. Kraft, Goddard, Laporta, Andrews. Oh, man. I think Laporta might be number 1. We have it in the Walter Picks app right now, and you can see these rest of season rankings for free, by the way, in the Walter Picks app. Use code SAM when you sign up. We got Kraft, then Laporta, then Andrews, then Goddard. I do think this Diontae trade's bad. You taking Debo for Flowers? Yep, for sure. I would do that. I'm 7-1. I need it just for the playoffs. Yeah, perfect. All you should be thinking about is the playoffs. If you're 7-1, you're 8-0. You're even if you are 6-2, even if you're 5-3, or depending on your league settings, sometimes you're in leagues where it's a 10-person league and 6 people make the playoffs, or you're in a 12-person league and 8 people make the playoffs. Like most people are just making the playoffs. Doesn't even matter where you finish, especially if there's no buys. If you're 4-4 in that case, like you should be thinking about the playoffs, even if maybe you're 3-5 and you have a good chance to get in. All that matters is making sure you win in those weeks if you get there. Is having Alexander Madison, Bucky Pollard, and Brees as RBs good? Yeah, I think it's doable. I think it's a doable running back situation in a 12-person league to win. You got Brees, who could smash in the fantasy playoffs. Great schedule. You got Pollard, who has a great schedule. And Bucky is a good schedule too. I think if Pollard and Bucky, they definitely fall into that category. If Rashad White or Spears end up missing time in the playoffs, the fantasy playoffs, they can win leagues because their schedule's great. Yeah, I'm fine holding Caleb Williams. Not a good game for the Bears offense really this week. DeAndre Swift really was the only guy that had a big game. 9.3 points versus the Commanders. Commanders have weirdly been good versus quarterbacks. But he's got some good matchups down the stretch. He still, I think, is trending up, over the last month. He's done really good in his positive matchups. He gets a positive matchup this week, so we'll see. Sam Vidal or Benson as a stash. Yeah, so let's take a look at the Chargers schedule here. I think it's probably Benson. Oh, man. Yeah, the Chargers have a good schedule too. Dobbins is definitely an interesting trade for because of that. Dobbins has been getting great work. Vidal is playing more than Benson, I think. 17% snap share. Let's take a look at Benson now. Benson only 6% snap share. He's barely playing at all. He does have an even better schedule. Man, it's close. Let's take a look at it's honestly really comparable situations when you really start to think about it for Vidal versus Benson. They got the lead veteran backs that are getting huge workloads. I mean, 82% snap share for Dobbins, highest of the season, 17 carries. He had 7 targets in this game. I mean, in both situations, both Kamani Vidal and Benson are an injury away from winning leagues. I honestly think it's Vidal. I think I would probably take Vidal over Benson. He's at least has a slightly bigger role now. His schedule's a little bit worse. Obviously, the draft capital's there for Benson. It's really tight though. I think they're like really comparable. But yeah, I think I lean towards Vidal. I got CD London, DK, and Higgins with Nico stashed on my bench. Who should I sell for running backs? Probably DK and T. Higgins in that situation is the guys I'd be looking to sell for the running backs. Achane, a good pickup, definitely. Trade Devontae Adams for B-Rob. If you don't start Devontae Adams, I think that's not the worst. Let's find Brian Robinson here. Got him at running back 17 rest of the season. Had a pretty good week this week. He's got a good matchup versus the Saints and the Falcons in the playoffs. You get the Eagles in between. He played well this week, actually, 65 yards, but only 8.6 points. Solid 4.1 yards per carry. He's been pretty efficient. 4.6 yards per carry this season. That's top 20 in the NFL. He has almost a touchdown per game. Brian Robinson, but he's a bit touchdown dependent. It's close. Adams gets the Jags in the fantasy playoffs. DJ Moore off the list. Yeah, DJ Moore. The Bears do have an intriguing fantasy playoff schedule. They get the Vikings and the Lions to start the fantasy playoffs. I mean, that is about as good as it gets. Close. It's a close call. I think DJ Moore and Adunze are still interesting buys. I still have Adunze as a buy. I think that Diontae is the better buy of the group. I still believe he's one of the more underrated receivers in the league. He only had 8.4 this past week, 3 catches. One injury to one of these receivers, and all of a sudden, these other receivers are getting close to 100% snap shares. They get the Vikings and Lions in the fantasy playoffs. I do still think Diontae, DJ, and Keenan have this league-winning upside. Do you have any bigger name trade targets? Yeah, so the bigger name trade targets, it's Breece Hall, it's Bijan Robinson, it's Jahmyr Gibbs, it's Christian McCaffrey. All of these guys are set up to win leagues this season if they stay healthy. I lean Njoku over Otten. Should I trade Cooper Kupp and Pickens for CeeDee Lamb? Yup. Steven, if you can do it, trading in this 2-for-1 type of scenario is a smash move, man. It's a smash move. It's a league-winning move. Upgrade from one of your starters. You're starting Kupp or Pickens every week in your lineup. If you're in a situation like that, then just trade both of them and try to go get CeeDee Lamb. And ideally, you find someone like that who's on a team that could start both Kupp and Pickens. And then there's a clear story about why it's good for both sides. The trades where there's an actual narrative that helps both sides are the trades that get done. Keep one, trade one. Brian Thomas Jr., Marvin Harrison Jr. Yeah, so Christian Kirk's out for the season. Pretty massive for Brian Thomas Jr., if we're being honest. He's got a much tougher fantasy playoff schedule, though. He's been better than Marv, I think, this season. 15.5 points per game. Marv is at 12.1, so yeah, he's been better by a decent margin. I think it's Marv. I think I keep Marv, trade BTJ. And BTJ probably would get more, I think, in a trade. Yeah, so I think Tank Dell definitely gets a boost from the Steph Diggs injury. Swift for CeeDee? Is that a real trade someone's willing to do? DeAndre Swift for CeeDee Lamb? I don't believe that. But if it is, accept immediately. But yeah, Tank Dell, he hasn't been himself really this season. And there's a few different reasons why, this could be. He got hurt. He also got shot this offseason. But, we haven't seen a game over 20 points yet for Tank Dell. You go back to last season, guys. He was over 20 points 4 different times. He only played like 9 games. And he's been really at his floor of last season, most weeks this year. He had 1 big game, 7 catches, 57 yards, a touchdown, week 6 versus a Pats defense. But he's going to be the focal point of his offense in week 9, the tough matchup versus the Jets. And then when Nico comes back, he's the clear number 2. This is really the ideal run out for Tank Dell in terms of the situation. The playoff matchups, not the best against the Dolphins and the Chiefs to start out. I do think it doesn't really matter for Nico. It doesn't matter a ton for Dell either if he gets the volume and the games are close and high scoring, which these 2 games could be. So yeah, I think he's a wide receiver 2. Sort of back end wide receiver 2, high end wide receiver 3 rest of the season. He's a bit more boom bust than you would want, but he definitely benefits from the Steph Diggs injury, 100%. Trade Metcalf for Pollard and Shakir. Metcalf for Pollard and Shakir. I don't hate this. Especially if you really need a running back. I do think Pollard's a sneaky buy. Him and Spears, they have a really good schedule in the playoffs. They get the Colts and Jags the last 2 weeks of the playoffs. Both will catch passes. Both have a pass-catching floor. Pollard's really been in a workhorse role since Spears went down. We saw what it looks like without Spears, and it's going to be a similar thing for Spears probably if Pollard misses time. He still had 15 points in a tough matchup this week, 94 over 110 yards, and he had 3 catches too. No touchdowns because the offense that he's on. But honestly, Mason Rudolph has sustained a little bit more of a relevant offense than I would have thought. So I think it's fine, especially if you're going to start Shakir too. Shakir is quietly had a massive couple of games. Him and Keon Coleman. He has 16 catches in 170 yards in his last 2 games. Clear Shakir. I do think the weather played in Shakir's role a bit. We talked about that in the Sunday Morning Live. That came to fruition to some extent. He had a season highest target share. This is probably going to be his highest target share of the season, I would guess. Pretty good playoff schedule though for the Bills passing attack. So yeah, I think it's a fair trade. Metcalf's the best player in the trade for sure. Do you see Diontae picking up? Yeah, I do think Adams will have better games. I think he'll find the end zone. He has no touchdowns yet. And he's going to be a favorite target still for Rodgers, I think, in the red zone. Tyler Conklin scored the touchdown for the Jets. Who's the other guy that scored for the Jets? You got to think that Adams gets a little bit more work in the red zone moving forward. Gets the Jags, too, in the first week of the playoffs. Puka or Brees? I'd go Brees over Puka. DJ Moore for JSN and Dobbins. Fair trade. Yeah, I'm down to do this. Dobbins does have a good playoff schedule. We're just looking at for Kamani Vidal, who's an interesting stash in his own right. Definitely prefer DJ Moore over JSN, who disappointed a bit without Metcalf in the lineup. Again, the weather was kind of tough for the Seahawks this past week. But Dobbins gets the Buccaneers good matchup. Broncos, average matchup. Then the Pats in the fantasy playoffs. And his role has been great. He's the 9th most yards on the ground this season, 13th most carries. He ranks 13th and 17th in rush attempts and targets. His total touches, I think, is top 12 among running backs. Kittle or Kelsey? Yeah, I prefer Kittle over Kelsey. Adams and Najee for Jahmyr Gibbs. Yeah, fair trade. Do this. Go upgrade to Gibbs, especially if you don't feel good starting at Devontae Adams. So you have another good guy to start in the flex. Sam, need a running back. Would you trade either Tank Dell or T. Higgins for Nick Chubb? Half PPR. I do think Chubb is an interesting one with Winston now starting. He gets the Chiefs, though, in the first week of the playoffs. Dead worst matchup you could possibly have. I don't think I would go after Chubb. He's still not going to catch that many passes. He did play 61% of snaps. Wow. Back up to a 70% rush share. 16 carries for Nick Chubb this week. Very interesting. Tank versus T is also a tough call. Who knows how serious the T. Higgins injury is going to be. He was balling before the injury. I think I lean T. Higgins over Tank. So, I mean, Tank for Chubb is a fair trade. It's a fair trade. And you have T. Higgins. We'll see. Hopefully Higgins is back this week. I could see it making sense. I'm definitely very scared about that Chiefs matchup, though, for Chubb in week 15. JT for CMC and Waddle. Yep, I would do that. I want CMC, I think, more than JT. I think I'd probably take CMC over JT if I had to choose between those two guys. Sam, how Pitt's looking for rest of season / playoffs? I mean, he's looking good, man. He's heating up. We talked about him heating up on the Sunday morning live, and now he's on fire. You know, he was heating up, now he's on fire. 25 points this past week. It was weird. This was actually one of his worst usage games of the season. He had a season low snap percentage this week, a season low route participation this week, a season low routes this week. Didn't matter because he converted on his 5 targets, 4 catches, 91 yards, 2 TDs. Finally got back in the end zone since week 1. Schedule's not great. The role's good. I think the tight ends that I'd be trying to upgrade to just in general, Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, TJ Hawkinson's a sneaky one with a good fantasy playoff schedule. Tucker Kraft's a sneaky one, and then also Njoku. The guys that I think are most likely to win fantasy leagues this year are Bowers, McBride, and Njoku. But Hawkinson's a sneaky one. And Kraft, I think, is a sneaky one too. Pitt still has a low floor. He does. He didn't even play half the snaps this week. That game wasn't that close, but he didn't even play half the snaps. Actually, it was close. They only won by 5. I think it was close at the end. Better buy Hunter, Bucky, or Kmet. Need tight end or running back. Yeah, I would probably rank them in this order, honestly. I think I'd go in this order. That's my time, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back live Thursday night to talk through the fun Thursday night game we get this week. We got the Texans versus the Jets. The Jets are somehow favored in that game. Wild stuff after losing to the Pats. We get Tank Dell on Thursday night, Breece Hall, a lot of good stars to look forward to on Thursday night. And then, of course, we'll be live Sunday morning. I'm also going to be posting a video with some trade advice on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram this week as well. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Time's the most valuable thing we have. Thanks for spending some time with me tonight. Good luck, everyone. We'll be back live in a few days.